Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Tyler from Valve News Network, and today I'm going to be talking about all unreleased and canceled Valve games that have information available on the internet. Here we go. We've got a lot of information to cover, so let's get started. The first large canceled game that I'm going to talk about is Prospero. Prospero was originally a fantasy action adventure game that later in development turned into an MMORPG. This game was developed by Valve at the same time Valve was developing Half-Life. It was to include a complex combat system with psionic powers, and the hero was known originally as Prospero, but later as the Librarian, or Elf. It was supposed to be known for a very intricate storyline, and there would have been a large online distribution system where players could create their own worlds and distribute them through other players. There would also be a server browser and a friend finder. Now, the majority of these ideas and philosophies within the design would later be used in Half-Life, Steam, and Portal. The game itself was canceled in 1997 so Valve could focus solely on Half-Life, and much of the level design was later reworked into the first Half-Life and later into the first Portal. Now, in 2006, in an FAQ Gabe did on his own Valve website, he was asked if Prospero would ever be worked on again, and he just said that after TF2 was released, which this was in 2006, they would start work on Prospero again. Of course, it is 2015 now, and Prospero has still not seen the light of day, so whether or not this game has ever actually been worked on again is unknown to the public, but it is known that this game will probably never come out. Which is sad, because the concept art itself makes the game look very cool, even though it is very primitive looking concept art and in-game screenshots, as this all was taken pre-1997. Prospero looked like it was a very fun game, but I do agree with Valve on its decision to be able to focus solely on Half-Life. The next canceled game on our list is the Life Dreamcast port. Set for release in late 2000, it was actually developed by Gearbox Software, the same game company that developed both Half-Life Opposing Force and Half-Life Blue Shift. This port was to include modified levels, models, and props, and also many Sega-related secrets added into the game itself. The game was canceled very late into the development due to the Dreamcast's failure and cancellation. Now, within this port are actually higher quality audio tracks compared to the Steam and PC released versions of Half-Life 1. Now, this originally had the HD model pack in mind and was the first game to ever use anything close to the HD model pack. Originally within the Dreamcast version was supposed to be an exclusive expansion story that would later turn into Half-Life Blue Shift. After the game was canceled, Sierra Online announced that Blue Shift itself would later be released as a standalone title that you could install without Half-Life. This was done because all the work made for assets on the Dreamcast version had to be put somewhere, so the HD model pack that was made originally for the Dreamcast version was then ported over to the PC, as the Dreamcast version would not come out at all. A playable build of this port was leaked onto the internet much later, and it is actually a very complete game. It was canceled weeks before going gold, and anybody can actually download the Dreamcast port of the game and play it on any standard Sega Dreamcast. A second disc was set to be released alongside the first disc to include Opposing Force, Team Fortress Classic, and Half-Life 1 Deathmatch. This was supposed to have Gold Source online multiplayer available to be played on the Dreamcast using the broadband adapter, but because the Dreamcast was canceled, the second disc wasn't even worked on. There are differences in this version, however. The game was made to be much easier, as the Dreamcast controller itself was not made with first-person shooters in mind, and there are also many different changes with levels themselves to make them easier to navigate or just to add completely new puzzle mechanics by themselves. There was even a level taken completely out of the Dreamcast build of the game for reasons that are unknown, but it's just really quirky and cool to look at a Half-Life game that is so similar yet so different. You have to be a really hardcore Half-Life fan to be able to see the differences, but once you do, you know that it's weird and you know that it's cool. Now, a mod was made to recreate the Dreamcast version to be played on the PC, and it was released in 2012, and this is not a fan recreation. A fan was able to unlock the Dreamcast ISO and able to pull out all the assets and just put them back together on the Half-Life PC version. And that's available to be downloaded on ModDB, and it's really sweet, as it's a complete port. It's exactly the same thing that you would play on the Dreamcast, only with better controls and better graphical settings. Before Valve bought out Turtle Rock Studios and started development on Left 4 Dead 1, they were originally working on a fairy RPG. In an interview with some of Valve's top employees, including Gabe Newell, Valve was asked about what they were doing before the development of Left 4 Dead happened, and they talked about a fairy-based RPG game that they were working on that later evolved into many things that were put into Left 4 Dead, including high-level cooperative AI, large environments that were set to tell a story in a multiplayer game, and new ways of controlling characters. This game is referred to by Doug Lombardi as the first failed Valve's start to Left 4 Dead, and Gabe referred to it as a useful failure, as many of the things that Gabe said were dumb were later not done in Left 4 Dead. The fairy-based RPG taught Valve what not to do in Left 4 Dead. This fairy-based RPG apparently did not go very far into development, and there is no screenshots, gameplay at all available to the public. The only thing the public knows is that there was a Valve fairy RPG. Next, there are two unreleased Half-Life games that were actually sent out to other developers to make, starting with the untitled EA Half-Life game. This game was discovered by a NeoGAF user who found a few pieces of concept art on a Coroflot profile for an R. Humphreys, who was an EA employee since 2004. This concept art shows something off of a Half-Life 2 environment, but somewhat of an earlier environment. It also has one piece of concept art that shows a town called Haven. Now, EA was apparently supposed to be developing a Half-Life expansion pack in the vein that Gearbox made Half-Life expansion packs soon after the release of Half-Life 2. This was before the Half-Life 2 episodes were decided to be made, and this was supposed to have its own standalone plot. Now, when I say standalone plot, that means that it might not have been Gordon Freeman as the main character, and it also means that it might have taken place before or after the events of Half-Life 2. This game was supposedly developed in between the years of 2004 to 2006 and was canceled very soon after development, and the only pieces of information that we have about it is the concept art that the NeoGAF user found. Concept art itself actually looks really cool. The armor on the officers you see here seems to be much earlier, and it seems that this game might have taken place before the events of Half-Life 2 and not after. But speaking of Half-Life 2, much later after the development of the episodes, there was supposed to be a Half-Life 2 Episode 4, which later found out was called Return to Ravenholm. This was another game that was sent out to a different developer, this time Arcane Studios. This project was developed between the years of 2006 and 2007, and there was a lot of concept art and models found on the internet. The concept art itself shows off a new kind of environment, and it all seems to take place in a Ravenholm type of environment. All the weapons you see in these in-game screenshots seem to be different than the actual Half-Life 2 weapons, which either means that you were not playing as Gordon Freeman or were playing as Gordon Freeman in a later period of time. Seeing as the title is called Return to Ravenholm, this is obviously taking place after Half-Life 2, but how much farther after Half-Life 2 this is taking is unknown. It should also be known that this game itself was not part of the Half-Life 2 episode story arc. Episode 1, 2, and 3 was supposed to be its own arc, and Episode 4 was to be its own story completely. It might have been telling a separate side story about Alex, her dog, or maybe a completely different story about Gordon himself. Episode 4 and Return to Ravenholm was confirmed by Mark Laidlaw to be the same thing a little bit later in time, but other than the in-game screenshots and model renders, there is no other information about Half-Life 2 Episode 4, other than Valve was planning on making this episode for quite a while. But the development stopped for Episode 4 in 2007 when Valve decided against the episodic model, and the project was eventually scrapped entirely. Lastly, there is what looks to be the largest of Valve's canceled products, Stars of Blood. Stars of Blood was apparently a space pirate adventure game, where you play as some sort of spaceman doing some sort of space business, and there is really no idea of what the story itself could have been. The first known sighting of Stars of Blood was when a Steam forum post talked about a guy's visit to Valve. He took lots of pictures and interviewed a couple of the people on the Team Fortress 2 team, but the most interesting part about this visit was he took a picture of a wall with concept art. This concept art did not match anything that Valve had released up until this time, and why he was allowed to take a picture of this in the first place made people question that maybe this was a canceled project to begin with. It wasn't until a little bit later when something called SOB was referenced in the Dota 2 code. Many people speculated that this SOB was once again another project that was currently in development from Valve, and many people were trying to figure out what it could have meant. It wasn't until Peter Coing's image profile contained some alleged SOB concept art. This concept art itself also matched some of the concept art that was seen in the Steam forum post concept art, and it is very awesome looking, space-themed concept art. Many of it shows either futuristic looking astronauts or futuristic looking alien creatures and very, very cool looking spaceships. It was later stated by Gabe himself when 4chan V visited Gabe on his birthday that the game was called Stars of Blood.
We had an internal project that Convertible was setting up called Stars of Blood. The Space Pirates game. That never saw the light of day. That's the only start of the been doing.
After that, animator Gray Horsefield leaves Valve and puts up a demo reel of his best work onto his profile. And in this demo reel includes a small section about space action. Many people assume that this space section is Stars of Blood. Now this, combined with all the concept art, shows that the Stars of Blood game itself was very far in development, but somehow it was cancelled. So the reason why Stars of Blood was cancelled in the first place is completely unknown to the public, but there is one thing that I know, and that is Stars of Blood looked awesome. This concept art looks amazing, and if the game even looked half as good as the concept art looks, that game could have been incredible. We all know that anything that Valve makes can be good, except Ricochet. Then everything that they can do is great, and I really think that this game should not have been cancelled, but I know that they had a reason for canceling it. But anyways, that was all the cancelled and unused Valve games that I could find information about on the internet. If I missed any, please tell me in the comment section below, and if there's enough, I might make a part 2 to this video. But thanks for watching. This video is the longest video I've ever made, and it has taken me the longest time I've ever taken on a video. So thank you for watching. As you know, I'm Tyler McVicker. I do Valve stuff. Valve is everything that I do. If this is the first video you've seen, please maybe click that subscribe button. I do a bunch of videos like this, sometimes on news, sometimes on canon, sometimes on unused content. But that's what I do, and it's my dream, so thank you for helping me make it true. But anyways, please like, favorite, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. It helps me out immensely. If you want to see me do some of those live streams that I love to do and you guys love to see, click on the link in the description to my second channel, Valve News Extra, where I live stream all the time. Thanks for watching, guys. As you know, I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Valve News Network. Thanks a lot, guys.